if you have this conviction, it will show up in the interview room with you. Right? You will come across as confident, which will further amplify your competence. Right? You will inspire confidence in others.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judy Chang. I'm a PM director at Google, and I'm the chapter lead for South Bay Women in Product. Thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for participating in the poll. I'm really happy to be here to talk about this topic of resilience with Parul Goyal, who is the PM director at Indeed. Parul has had an illustrious 15-year career working on enterprise products, some of which have worked extremely well and some of which she would call life learning lessons. And in the spirit of learning, we're hosting this session today to talk about how to build resilience. So, Parul, just like the participants in this meeting, tell me, how many jobs have you applied for and not gotten?
So if I look at the options in the poll, I would say 31 to 75.
Okay.
I think if I take the the online applications that I have submitted and that all of them have gone into a black hole, probably even close to 100.
Yeah. I mean, I was probably the one person who had the 75 plus. I include those, and I include like every job I ever applied for from undergrad on. And we used to get our rejection letters in the mail, and we would tape them up on our apartment walls to see who could get the most. And that was actually just a really healthy way for us back then to destigmatize the rejection that we were facing when we went to that mailbox. So really looking forward to your session today and to your tips on how to build resilience.
Thank you, Judy. Are we ready to start? I think we have quorum. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to share my learnings and my experience with you. I wanted to start by acknowledging a truth I discovered the hard way, right? Which is, even if you are a great product manager, it doesn't automatically translate into being good at product management interviews, right? Project management interviews are a skill of their own and one that you have to work and get better at, right? So I'm hoping some of you had a similar finding when you started looking for, when you were when you were looking for a new role. So to find a job successfully, and especially your dream job, there are two things that you need. You need the skills, those interviewing skills, and you need the emotional resilience to stay in the game, right? And obviously, if you have these two things, you're going to get your dream job. But I'm really into, a lot of you have taken a precious hour of your time to attend this session, right? So I want to understand, why is this the skill and resilience important to you, right? What are you looking to get out of it? Of course, your dream job is the ultimate goal, but what are other things that being resilient, being good at interviewing gets you? So maybe you can put your answers in the chat. Yeah, and Rachel says for confidence and positive attitude. Absolutely. Yes, for your well-being, absolutely. So I can share. Please keep typing. Please share your answers with us. Uh, these are some of the observations I have had as I've observed other people. They have developed resilient as they have developed the skill, and some that I've experienced myself. Right. If you are somebody who feels confident that you can go out there, get a great job, you show up with more confidence in your current role. Right. You have more leverage, right? Because your current employer knows that you are at a flight risk. You have more leverage to negotiate more money, bigger title. You have more opportunities and options available to you, right? Because again, if you're confident, you can go out and pursue those opportunities. You grow your network, right? Because if you have confidence in this, in your ability to go get a new job, you go out and network, you reach out to people. Every time I go out and interview, I learn something new about product management as a skill, right? So these are some of the things that I have observed. Let us see what else. Grown professionally and set up in career, gain confidence, to learn about what companies and roles are appealing. Yeah, and align with you, absolutely. to not feel discouraged and continue the search. Oh, yeah, that's a super important one. Let's see. I always feel energized in interviews. Nice. Yeah, that's true. But the steps leading up to interviews, they can be draining. Get useful insights and build connection to learn and present myself better. Great one, Julia. I like to make sure that I'm looking for roles. I'm staying positive and healthy state of mind. Nice. Thank you for sharing your answers with us. So, you know, interviewing skill obviously is, especially for product management, is now a booming industry, right? There are books written on the topic. There are all of these communities that do mock interviews, and they're great resources, but they all focus on the skill part of the process, right? What we are going to talk about is resilience, especially emotional resilience, which is the second an important aspect of going out and getting your dream role, right? And the reason this emotional resilience is important is because interviewing has become kind of an arduous process, right? They've become more complex. Product management as a role has become very competitive. So as you set out to find your dream job, you can expect some ups and downs, right? So I touched upon this earlier. You submit your application online, it goes in a black hole. You never hear back, right? And I know this is a popular strategy is I'm going to interview with companies I don't really want to join as practice, right? I have done that only to be rejected by them, which really hurt. Like I didn't want you either. And then you interview with companies you do want to join, and then maybe you don't do as well in interviews. You're disappointed with yourself, or perhaps you thought you did well, but you got rejected anyway, right? And it's frustrating because there is no feedback. So it's not always a rosy picture, right? There are ups and downs. But if you are emotionally resilient, you are going to be able to stick to the process until you get what you want, right? You're going to be able to weather these setbacks and not really lose confidence. You're going to focus on learning from them rather than beating yourself up, right? That's why emotional resilience is important. Now, me personally, in the first half of my career, I had a great success rate in going out and getting jobs, right? I think I had a close to 100% success rate. I would interview, I would get the job, I would move on. Second half of my career, I started interviewing for product management roles. And the first few times I tried, it didn't work out. And it really discouraged me. And I kind of saw the value of that our parents' generation had, right? That you stick to the same company for 30 years. You don't have to go through this process. So I was very tempted to say, you know what, maybe I'll just retire from this company that I was at. But thankfully, I then had the better sense to then invest in learning this skill and emotional resilience. So, what I'm going to share with you are the three strategies that I have learned over time for emotional resilience and that work for me. Okay. And the three strategies are number one is conviction, number two is communication, and number three is cohort. So, let's start with conviction. What I mean by conviction is that you believe that you deserve what you're looking for. And whether it's more money, whether it's a title, it's breaking into a new area, you are in the right playing field, right? You belong there, you deserve that role. Right? And the reason this conviction is important is really for two reasons. The first one is if you have this conviction, it will show up in the interview room with you. Right? You will come across as confident, which will further amplify your competence. Right? You will inspire confidence in others. Similarly, if you lack this conviction, that's also going to show up in the interviews, right? You might come across as timid and unsure. You're not going to be able to inspire confidence, right? So that's number one is it really impacts how you show up in the interviews, this conviction. The second reason, perhaps, is the more important one, right? Whether you have conviction or not also impacts what story you're telling yourself. If you lack conviction, you're going to tell yourself, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. There's so many qualified people out there. Somebody else will get this job, right? And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You kind of internalize failures and it further impacts your confidence. And what would happen then is you won't be able to weather these setbacks, right? You're going to kind of give in the face of failures. You might stick with where you are right now, or you might settle for less. Right? So that's why conviction is super important. And again, this is something I experienced firsthand. I was looking for a role, and actually, I was looking for a level up. I was trying to find a job one level above where I was. And I reached out to this old connection to tell him that, hey, your company is hiring. There is this role I'm interested in. And he messaged me back saying, oh, just to let you know that this company doesn't do level ups, right? This is our hiring process. And he really was trying to be helpful. Except when he had moved to that company, he had gotten a level up, right? He was hired at a higher role than he was at. So even though I saw this very clear double standard, it still really hurt my confidence. Right? It made me feel like I was being greedy and I was overreaching, or yeah, I wasn't really like he didn't see me as qualified for that role. And so it really shook my confidence. My career coach at that time stepped in and said, so wait, this person used to know you 10 years ago, and you're letting his image of you override what you think of yourself. Right? So that was very clear signal to me that I had to work on my conviction. Right? It wasn't really on him, it was for me to work on my conviction. So then I tried a few things, right? It's like reading my review, like all the positive comments in my review, reading my peer review. And those things work for a while, but at the end of the day, they're external validation, right? And to build your conviction, what really matters is what you think of yourself. So the one strategy that has really worked for me is this. When I'm looking for a role, I go out and find job descriptions in the companies I want to be at, like companies I'm interested in. I make a list of them, either in Excel or Google Sheet, and then I very honestly rate myself in each of these skills with very specific examples, right? And this is what it does for me. Number one, it kind of gives a definite shape of skills and expertise that I need to get the job I want. It highlights areas where I have conviction so that I can highlight them in the resume. And it also highlights areas where I lack conviction so that I can go out and build that conviction. Right. So once, and then, what I do is if there are certain areas where I don't have enough evidence, I lack confidence, I come up with a plan to go out and address those. Right. But one thing I don't do is I do not postpone interviewing, because that's a pitfall that you don't want to fall into. Right. You will really, I mean, it's very easy to tell yourself, oh, I'm going to start interviewing once I'm ready, and that might never happen. You might never feel ready, right? So no, if you meet 60% of the criteria, that's good enough. Of course, work on building your conviction, but go out there and interview. Right? So that's my number one strategy, is build your conviction. If there's one thing you take away from this talk, let it be this, right? Find a process. It doesn't have to be this. Whatever you do, but really believe that you go out, that you deserve the job that you're looking for. The second strategy that I have is communication, right? Which is how you show up in these interviews. Many of us make the mistake of trying to show up as somebody else who we think deserves this job, right? Trying to be somebody else, trying to sound like somebody else we think will get this job, right? Or should get this job. We sometimes trying to guess what the interviewer wants to hear, right? And that's what we are trying to say. But the thing is, we don't know what the interviewer wants to say, right? We don't really know what they like, what they don't like. So it's really out of our control. And so, when we try to do that, when we try to guess what the other person wants to hear and say that, after the interview, we obsess about, did I do it? Like, did they like us? Did they like me? Did I do what was needed? And again, this is something that just we have such little control over. It's a really fruitless exercise, right? We are obsessing over something that we can't really change. Um, uh, Also, we are pretty bad at gauging reactions. So, a friend of mine who's an engineering leader, she has done a lot of hiring in her career. She was telling me that she usually does the last interview with candidates and she asks them, what do you think went well, what you didn't go well? And she said that their impressions have very little correlation with what the interviewers actually say about them, right? Because interviewers have different personalities, they process information separate differently, so you don't really know. I once went through an interview process where I thought I had bombed it. I avoided the recruiter for 2 days because I thought, if you're going to reject me, just put it in an email. You don't need to call me. But she was actually calling me to make me an offer. Right? This is actually a true story. So it really, you don't know what's going on in the other person's mind. Right? So here, the reframe I would ask you to do is, instead of focusing on what the other person wants to hear, focus on what is the story that you want to tell, right? Focus on, are you conveying your strengths well? Are you doing your awesomeness justice? Because that is something that you do have full control over, right? So I'm going to share with you two pieces of advice on this of how to do it. One is, this is specifically for behavioral questions, right? So, for example, tell us about a time when XYZ happened. Imagine that there is a junior product manager or somebody who reports to you is asking you, hey, I am struggling with stakeholder management. I hear you are really good at it. How do you do it? Right? So, in your answer, you're not trying to prove your competence. You are the expert. You're trying to help somebody else. Right? So, try to answer the question from that point of view. You're not proving your competence. You're trying to help somebody. The second thing I have done, which has really helped me, is this 1 minute retro at the end of an interview. Right? If it takes less than a minute, I write down two things. One area where I told my story really well, one area that I'm going to improve the next time, right? So it's not about what they took away from the interview, it's about how I did, how I thought I showed up in telling my story, right? So that's my second strategy for you, which is communication. The third one that I have is the cohort, right? Which is what you absorb from the people around you. So here I have a question for you. Many of us have people in our network who seem like serial job hunters, right? They're always in the market for the next opportunity, right? They interview a lot. Uh, if you know such people, how do they approach job hunt or interviews? So again, put your answers in the chat if you know somebody like that. Anyone? Yeah, low stakes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. They don't have as much emotion attached to it as some of us do. Supreme confidence. That's actually, you're right. It does go hand in hand. Know your worth. They're always connecting and interviewing even if they're not prepared. Oh, such a great point. Curiosity. Yeah, these are all really great, great responses. They do it for fun. So I'm going to talk about somebody I know who does exactly that. But let me know, before I talk about my cohort, I wanted to tell you what my starting point was. I used to associate a lot of shame to failure in interviews. Right? It used to make me feel like I'm not a good product manager, and of course, that's the reason that I'm not getting through these interviews. So this was for me a secret that I wanted to hide. Even when I was in the market looking for a new job, I wouldn't let my network know, right? Even if I had a friend in the company who could refer me, I was like, what if the company doesn't like me? My friend would come to know. So it was really hurting me. And then I came across two people in my network who had a much, much healthier attitude towards networking, right? And towards interviewing. And I'll tell you about them. One is my friend Santosh. He's a product manager. And he was looking for a job. And he just shared with me that, oh, when I start looking for a job, for the first 7 interviews, I expect to fail. Like that was his number 7. He's like, that's just warm up, right? That's the room that I give myself to get ready and really get in the mindset to go out and interview. And that was just such an empowering point of view for me, right? For me, every interview seemed like a test of my competence, right? So this was kind of a new way of thinking for me. The second person that really helped me was my friend Anjana. She's the engineering leader I talked about. And I remember this very specific conversation with her. She had been interviewing for a role. And then I asked her, oh, how did it go? And she was like, well, no, it didn't work out. They told me that they needed somebody more strategic. And that was it. Like she moved on. Like she wasn't really sad about it. Didn't really impact her. And I was like, if somebody had told me that, it would become an existential crisis. Right? And I was just so empowered by how they let rejection just roll off their back. Right? And it is exactly what somebody was saying. They did not attach as much emotion to it as I did. So as I spent more time with Santosh and Anjana, some of their attitude rubbed off on me, right? And I was able to let go of this shame slowly. And when I think about it objectively, I have probably interviewed 50 plus candidates in my career, right? And even for the candidates I say no to, I don't judge them. I don't think they're bad. It's usually just a bad fit, right? But why don't I show the same compassion? Why don't I bring the same mindset in judging myself? Right? That's the question. So, this is my advice to you. Go find your Santosh and Anjanas, right? Spend time with them, hear them, and maybe you will get to a point where you will be able to say, oh, it didn't work out, and move on. And the second thing is be somebody else's Santosh and Anjana. There are a lot of people out there who associate this shame to not being successful interviews, right? Be the wall for them. Like go hear them out. You're going to empower yourself and you're going to empower them. So I know we are going to do a blended exercise really quickly, but I wanted to share one more thing. So I found this kids book. It's called Pink. I don't know if you guys are able to see it. This book illustrates the core of building resilience beautifully. Right? It basically says that the ping belongs to us. Right? We can go out and ping, but the pong belongs to somebody else. Right? We can't really worry about how somebody else would respond. So go out and ping freely, go out and ping bravely, and don't worry about the pong. Right? So go out and interview, tell your story, build your conviction. Let the assessment be interviewer's job. Like that's not your job. Let that go. Just you focus on building your conviction and telling your story. And that's what we are going to practice actually in the one-on-one blenders. Judy, do you want to bring up the
Yes, definitely.
promo?
Thank you, Parul,
Yeah.
for this. This advice is so easy to apply and to say, and yet it's also, when I say it's easy, it's also hard to do. Right? It's hard to disentangle yourself from the decision from your being. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's a bad fit versus being a bad PM or not having the PM
Yeah.
skills. Um, I can share that when I interviewed at Google once, it was such a disaster. It was embarrassing, and I really had no idea how to do the interview. And 5 years later, I reapplied. I got the job offer this time. In the Noogler training, one of the people asked, how many people here have applied to Google more than once? And half the hands in the room went off.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you think about what does a rejection mean, it's just a no for now. It's not
Yeah.
a no forever. It's not you're a bad person. It's just not right now, not a fit.
Yeah.
You can come back. You can try again.
Exactly. So
All right.
none of these no's are forever. You're
They're not
absolutely right.
forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So let me share a little bit about the blender exercise. Um, Parul gave an example of how you're going to share your product superpower. We're going to get into groups of two. You will share your product superpower with a partner, and the other person will prompt you back. And we'll show this in the blender session as well. And then you'll do a 1 minute retrospective of how you did. So I'm going to ask you now to join the mixer, and you'll see this on your hop-in screen. The handshake icon is what you're going to press, and then you'll press the join now. And during the mixer, if you want to exchange contact info with your partner, please feel free to do that as well. And then we'll prompt you to come back, join the meeting again, and we'll do one more mixer. So you'll meet with two people total during this session.
Are you the kind of person who enjoys interviewing?
Do I? No.
Yeah. No.
No.
That was a pretty emphatic no. You just have
I
to do
mean,
it. You do it when you have to do it.
I think I used to think it was like really disloyal to do it, and then I talked to one of my colleagues a few years ago, and she was like, "Listen, all these execs do it. They come
Yeah.
back and they've got these offers, and this is how they get their promotions." And she said, "This is about knowing your value.
Yeah.
Like if you know your value, you're just going to be more content." I was
Yeah.
like, "Hmm." But I think for me, it's just been because I've been so busy. Like I'm sure you too. Like baby, when
Yeah.
you're busy, it's another job
It
to
is another job. You're absolutely right.
um, so. Yeah, I've not been good about that.
Yeah.
What about you? Are you a serial?
I am trying to be very honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of went through this. I had to have a huge mind shift change, like a mindset shift, to be able to say, no, no, no. Number one, this is not a judgment. Number two, it's a
Yeah.
skill that I have to develop. And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel myself at the risk of losing it again. Like, oh, I'm comfortable. The things are going well at work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very
Mm-hmm.
tempting to say, oh my gosh, half an hour with the recruiter. I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Uh, but I would really like to stay on top of
Mm.
it, right? And
Yeah.
somebody said that they're always talking and connecting without being prepared. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm working on. Like, you know
Mm.
what? I will not spend any time preparing. I'm going to have that conversation and see how that goes.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Colleen.
Hi. I figured I'd break the ice and just show what it's like to kind of come on stage and ask the questions.
Nice. Thank you.
Um, I really enjoyed our practice. I think one thing I'd love to hear more on is maybe how to assess yourself in your storytelling, like what metrics to consider. Like I kind of black out when I like tell things. I'm like, I don't know what I just said. I hope that went well, you know. So any feedback you have on that, I think would be interesting to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, for assessment, there's going to be a qualitative and a quantitative part of the assessment, right? So for certain skills, so let's take stakeholder management as an example. I think you have to do some prep in advance to say, okay, this is my thought process, right? These are the things I take into consideration, what's important to them, being collaborative, communication, all of those things, right? And I think part of your assessment would be the things that are important to you and you do well. Do you think you were able to convey it in your
Mhm.
story? Right? I think that's going to be a part of assessment. I think the second part, I think this comes over time, is were you crisp? Were you rambling? I mean, people do
Mhm.
both, and it's okay. It's not a big deal. But I think that's another, the presentation itself is something else that you can assess yourself.
Cool.
Judy, did you have any
Um,
suggestions?
I think it's helpful to prepare answers to common questions, especially because when you're nervous, it's harder to remember them. But you're going to get asked, "Tell me about yourself in 1 to 2 minutes." You should
Yeah.
be able to do that. What are you good at? Tell me three things that make you a great PM. You should have that answer off the top of your head. What attracts you to this role or company? Again, you should have a 30-second answer for that. Um, so while you can't prepare for all your questions for the most common ones, you should write it down. And the one mistake that people make when they're not prepared is they ramble. So if I'm interviewing someone and I say, tell me about yourself, and they talk for 10 minutes, I
Yeah.
know that they're not prepared. If they talk for 2 minutes, I know that they've thought about this a lot and they know how to conduct an interview. So
Mhm.
just the length of your answers and the quality of those answers to common questions is a good indicator to the interviewer of whether like you're really prepped for interviewing.
So
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a really good point, Colleen. I have also been in interviews where somebody, like, in a 30-minute interview, somebody took 10 minutes to answer, tell me about yourself. So the time is an important aspect of it. And like I said, like, don't be too hard on yourself. Once you first
Mhm.
start doing it, you might ramble, but then again, that's something you can write down as you want to improve the next
Mm.
time.
Yeah, especially when it's the same question over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Right.
Cool.
But
Thanks.
apply your own criteria of what good looks like. That's the important thing.
Love that. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen.
There's a question here in the chat from Chen. Do you have any suggestions to stay resilient for aspiring PMs transitioning to becoming a PM, having trouble getting past calls with the recruiter or the resume screening?
I do know that this is a difficult transition to make, right? And you're not alone, Chen. I mean, there is a whole community of aspiring PMs who run into the same thing. So I think this is where I think there are a few things are going to be important, right? Again, conviction is going to be important, even though you might not have experience. as a product manager, through your side projects, maybe hackathons, you might have developed some of those skills, right? So going through that exercise to build your conviction, even without the experience, I have the soft skills, or maybe even the hard skills if you have worked on it, right? I have the skills to succeed. I think that's one part of the work. And then finding the right group of people, right? And this could include two groups of people, people who were in your bucket or in your category but are now slightly ahead. Maybe they have succeeded as a product managers or in getting product manager roles, right? Talking to them, right? What position were they in, what helped them, right? People who are slightly ahead of you in the curve. And the second one is connecting with people and helping people who are still in the boat with you, right? Who are other struggling aspirant product managers, right? So drawing energy from each other. So it's really basically the same concepts that I talked about, right? Conviction, communication, cohort. Just find like just shifting. It's a slight shift in how you would approach it. A lot of times it's a matter of when. If you stick with it long enough, you are going to get a job. Right? It really is a matter of when.
I'd also say, building on that, is oftentimes people feel like they need to leave their current company to PM
Mm,
somewhere else.
yeah.
You're going to have your best chance of getting a PM role when you already have a strong brand. Even if your strong brand is not as a PM, if people know that you're a hard worker, that you are a kind person, that um, you are responsible, they're just more likely to give you that chance, even if it's at your current company in an unrelated role. There are opportunities as well, often to volunteer. Right now, I have someone volunteering with me. We call it a 20% project. This person approached me and said, I love your product area. I'm interested in XYZ. Could I work with you on something? And so I'm able just to give this person who's not a PM some projects that a PM would do. And the nice thing is that if I do have a role open up, I'm going to be thinking about that person, even though they might not have the typical PM qualifications I'd be looking for. I will have seen how they perform in projects. So think about how you can position yourself for PM roles, even when they're not posted within your own company, if that's an option. The other thing I would also add is volunteering opportunities can be a great way to show PM skills. Like if you have a cause that you're passionate about, look to see if there are PM related skills that you can develop with a charity or nonprofit, whether that's like leading a campaign or setting a new strategy or helping someone else on the team. Those are going to be skills that are very transferable. I volunteer at a nonprofit called Tech for Campaigns, which is it's politically oriented, but this is where you're helping um, political candidates build like up their tech chops. So you
Yes.
might create a website for them. You might help them with building email campaigns and messages, things like that.
And it can be any cause. Like there are nonprofits, there are organizations really for most
Yeah,
causes out there.
everything.
Find something that you connect with and try to find a way that helps them and also helps you in developing a skill. So
Yeah,
I
there's
knew
so many.
somebody. Yeah, there's just so many. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a cause outside of your organization. Even your ERGs, which is employee resource groups.
Yes.
So maybe it's for example a women in product community within your company, or I don't know, like maybe Asian community, whatever the community that you belong to. That could be another stage for you to showcase your skills. I know I met some great aspiring PMs when during a conference at PayPal. Like they were really, or they were very involved in organizing that conference, and they were able to showcase their skills of bringing people together, making decisions, delivering on time in spite of obstacles, right? And those are all great skills for a product manager. So just be resourceful. Even within your company there might be such opportunities where you can kind of get some visibility, showcase your skills. There was a question. Um, what's the best way to talk about these things on LinkedIn resume? Is it okay to add a product title for these type of projects, or is it better to keep them under your current non product title. So I can share my perspective, Judy, and I would love for you to weigh in as well. I think it really depends. I would say case by case, right? For example, if you are volunteering for an external organization like Judy talked about, and the role that you're playing or the job that you're doing is of a product manager, right? If you have enough conviction that it would qualify as a product manager role, I wouldn't shy away from it. But if it wasn't product manager, maybe it was more of a project manager, it was more of a coordinator, then I probably would be more honest and kind of highlight that there were product aspects of the role, but it wasn't truly product management role.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like if you're, let's just take the Tech for Campaigns example. So if your role was to meet with the candidate to understand their stance and then to distill it into messages and campaign requirements, I would call that a product management role. You were going in there and you were taking their top three things that they stand for, amplifying them on the website, making sure that point got across, and then building the site with that in mind. That's very PME. If what you were doing was more like coordinating deadlines and getting assets from different people, then I wouldn't call that a PM skill.
Yeah.
But it's still useful. It's just not
Yeah.
traditional PM.
Still put it on your resume and LinkedIn,
Yeah.
still highlight those, but yeah, I wouldn't call it product management.
It's been really a pleasure to moderate and to meet you all. And I really appreciate the advice that I got today from Parole too. It's always good to refresh and hear a different perspective. And thank you all for joining today. And please take the survey and let us know if the session was useful.
Thank you so much, Judy. This was a fun conversation. Thank you, everyone, for your
Parole.
comments
Thank you,
and
Women in
questions.
Product, for hosting this.
Thank you. Bye bye.